Hey everyone, the name is Kris Barocsi, and this is the second part of my guitar tone words dictionary thing. In the first part, I try to explain words such as open, airy, scooped, all those words that we like saying, all those adjectives that should describe our guitar tones. Now, this is the second part, and I've got a ton of recommendations in the comments under that first video. By the way, I'll put it right here, and you'll find a link in the description box too if you want to check that out. It's cool. Check out my merch. I don't know, it's a cool shirt. Maybe you want one. And of course, subscribe to the channel and give this video a like if you enjoy what I'm doing here. So in the second part, I will only discuss words and show examples of those guitar sounds that you recommended. The first word is throaty. Now this is a cool one. It can be a good or a bad thing. Also, it can mean two things. Like for example, a throaty strat sound is something that is just awesome. It's a think Stevie Ray Vaughan or John Mayer when he plays dirty, those kind of really cool, mid-range heavy, nasty strat sounds. That's usually a huge compliment if someone says like, oh, that's a nice and throaty strat sound. The other meaning is much more of like overall like a rock distortion sound. If you say it's throaty, that is usually a pretty aggressive sounding, pretty compressed, mid-range heavy sound. It's like really like pushy, like has that frequency that something like that, like some sort of a mid-range. And depending on the song and the style, it can be a really good thing, or it can just be a sound you want to avoid. I personally really dig it. Chewy. And this is one of my favorite words, and it's definitely one of my favorite guitar tones. And it's not only about how that guitar tone sounds like, but also how it feels like. So it does have to do something with the playing feel and with the type of compression. It is just a very comfortable, nice to play, sweet feeling guitar tone. Chewy is when it's not, you don't have to fight your tone. It's when it just makes your fingers do things, right? When it just slides. It's like, imagine a well-lubricated, well-oiled car engine, right? It's smooth. Farty. Now that is an issue. A farty low end or farty guitar tone usually means that you have some sort of a clipping or distortion issue. It could be that the speaker is broken. It could mean that something is mismatched. It could mean that the power amp of your amp, the tubes are misbiased. There's another way how you can get a farty guitar sound without having any technical difficulties with your rig, and that is if you put a high gain clipping like a pedal in front of something that's already pretty high gain. So if you stack high gain sounds, that usually ends up giving you that undefined sort of farty low end. Whenever you play a power chord or a palm mute especially, that will just end up falling apart and giving you that farty tone. It's not cool. Spongy. Now this is something that is very closely related to Chewy. Spongy, Chewy, kind of similar. But with Spongy, I also think about it's a bit more about the tone and not just about the feel. It's definitely a feel thing as well. So the type of compression is definitely something that belongs to a good spongy sound. But it's also the sound. Like if you imagine Andy Timmons' neck pickup sound, that DiMarzio Cruiser neck pickup that he has with his rig and his amps and his fingers, that is to me the perfect, unbeatable spongy guitar sound. It's really cool, it's really open, has a lot of like the presence and treble frequencies, but it's like a very rolled off, sweet, spongy, just delicious, that kind of sound. Flabby, that's definitely not a cool thing, but there's an amp that is like the perfect example of a flabby guitar tone or flabby low end. That is the rectifier series, single, dual, triple, whichever rectifier. If you don't use a boost pedal or some sort of an overdrive or some sort of an EQ in front of that amp, it definitely has a really flabby low end. It's like big, huge, it sounds awesome, but it's like slow and uncontrolled and like that is definitely a flabby low end. So here's a short clip of me 13 years ago or something, playing my triple rectifier in our rehearsal room back then. This was one of my first videos, by the way, and this is where I showcase how the amp sounds like without the tube screamer in front. Gnarly. Now that's tricky. I can give you my take, but I'm pretty sure there are people who will think very differently. To me, gnarly is something that's kind of over the top, kind of too much, kind of ugly in a way, but for whichever reason, we find it really, really damn cool. It's the kind of sound that makes you go stank face, like, ooh, 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 like, I don't want to like it, but I love it. I don't know why. That is to me gnarly. Sexy, cool, weird, like a mixture of negative and positive things. Pokey, that is pretty simple to explain. That is a guitar tone with a lot of very unpleasant sort of upper mid-range to treble kind of frequencies. Something that just makes, like, feels like someone poking your eardrums. It's like not nice, very unpleasant. Edge of breakup. It is kind of easy to explain, but if you think about it, I think everyone has a different take on it. Like, where is the edge of breakup for them? It's a very subjective thing. Usually we're talking about your amp or a very low gain overdrive, where if you don't dig in the strings, you have a very nice and clean sound. But if you do dig in and hit the strings harder or go for like a bridge pickup, big chord kind of thing, then your guitar tone is not clean anymore. It's not really distorted, but you have that kind of compression, you have that kind of clipping happening that is like borderline overdrive. Saggy. That is an amp term, or maybe an overdrive pedal, but usually you say this to describe an amp's feel or sound. Saggy is usually a positive thing, unless you play tight technical metal, because then maybe you don't want the sag. But saggy is like a sweet little slower reaction, something that is like a little chewy and spongy, if you know what I mean. We've discussed those words already. It's something that happens, I think, if we're talking about the technical side, it happens in the power amp section of the amp. A saggy amp is usually something that most people love about like a cranked amplifier, tube amp. It's just a very nice and airy and three-dimensional kind of clipping, really. Quacky strat sound. That is the second position of strat pickup selector, the bridge pickup and the middle pickup together. That will give you sort of a cocked wah kind of really cool duck-like mid-range, something nasal. It's really cool and unique for sure. And yeah, it's if you want to have that sound, you better have a strat. Bell-like. That can refer to guitar's sound, an amp's sound. Think about the Edge, U2, that kind of guitar sound, maybe a strat going into a clean-ish kind of sound, maybe some delay, some like heavenly, beautiful bell-like harmonic content, lots of harmonic content actually. I think that is the key here. It's not really about the amount of treble. It's not like you crank the treble, then you'll get a bell-like sound. It's a sound where you don't have to crank the treble, and it already has a very cool, super busy, and very sort of airy and open and whatever presence and harmonic content. Creamy. In a way, it's the opposite of bell-like. With creamy, I do not want to hear a lot of treble, and I don't need a lot of harmonics and all those things. What I want is a very comfy and sweet mid-range, for sure. I don't even think of a lot of low end and bass frequencies when I'm talking about a creamy sound, or I'm tweaking my tone to get a creamy sound. It really is about the mid-range. It shouldn't have like a very aggressive certain frequency, because then we get closer to like a cocked wah kind of, something, or like a nasal sound. A creamy sound is really just a very broad mid hump, really a mid push, and not a lot of like sparkle on top. Amp-like. Now this usually describes overdrives. This usually means frequencies, like certain frequencies, enough low end, enough treble and presence to make it sound big enough to convince you that you're hearing the clipping, the overdrive of an amp. But it's not only the frequencies, like it's not about how much low end you have and how much treble. You do need enough low end and treble, otherwise it just sounds like a pedal. But it's also the harmonic content, it's the airiness, like how big does it feel? Like, close your eyes, does it sound like a person playing a big amp, or does it sound like a pedal? And that is sometimes really hard to put in words, really, but I think there's some sort of a three-dimensionality to it, like the bigness of the sound, plus, of course, the frequencies. It has to have enough bowls and enough, treble and presence and everything. And the last one is Boxy. Now, this usually means a lot of mid frequencies, a lot of mid-range, and not a lot of low end, and also not a lot of treble. But it's really hard to like, I never measured the frequencies, like where is that limit where it just sounds like a tube screamer, which is not Boxy, it's just mid-humpy, and where does it start to sound like Boxy, like where's the frequency where it has to drop? To me, a Boxy guitar sound has a lot of lower mid-range, but then not a lot of actual low end, and definitely no real presence or openness to the sound. That is a very wide pushed mid-range. That's what I would call Boxy. Alright, that's more than enough for a part 2. Actually, I didn't use any of the words that I wrote down for myself for a part 2 because you guys had so many recommendations and like word requests. I still have clear, boomy, the brown sound, woman tone, mellow, balanced, juicy, flat, artificial, metallic, blah, blah, blah. So many other words. If you want to see a part 3, hey, let me know in the comments below. Alright, see you in the next video. Bye-bye.